we can get so much more accomplished. But ladies, if you are in need of help because you have this turmoil going on within you, there are actually some Black psychologists and Black psychotherapists who are dealing with trauma, Black trauma, and helping Black women to become healed and find wholeness. Because believe it or not, some of the traumas are passed down. So I'm going to cut it here. Thank you so much. I'm sorry.
No. You are fabulous, wonderful, magnificent. Oh, my goodness.
Thank
I
you,
wish
guys.
you could hear the thunderous applause that everyone's giving you. Thank you, Dr. Hudson.
Thank you.
Again, beautiful on the inside, beautiful on the outside.
So are you.
Bless your heart. All right, it's so exciting. Our next speaker is Dr. Mello Desire. I love that her last name is Desire. She's a policy director for the National Fraternity Order of Police, U.S. In 2001, after receiving an MFA in therapy arts, Mello realized that evidence-based practices correlate with performing in visual and creative arts and the decline of suicide. So this shapes her core solutions. After receiving her doctorate in NLP in 2009, Mello focused on youth behavioral health and became a suicide prevention specialist. In 2009, this is so sad, the sudden death of her 13-year-old son, Kingdom James Hernandez, from gun violence, led to the creation of the Kingdom Warriors Foundation 4 years later. In 2013, the foundation started with 11 homeless youth from Skid Row in Los Angeles. While battling homeless, these students learned playwriting and performed their own skits as their wellness recovery action plan. So Mello is the author of the upcoming book, The Invisible Face, highlighting economic race relations. Current goals are to implement legislative changes, restore families impacted by DCSF, and restore human rights through Black intelligence. As a Haitian American, Mello comes from a long line of framers. Her great-great-grandfather was the first framer in Chicago in 1780. Mello Desire's ultimate goal is to establish a new constitution in Haiti. What a great goal. Oh my goodness, we're so excited to welcome you. Thank you so much for being here. And
thank you so much for having me. Well, this is a pleasure, a much needed conference, and here today with my co-host, Amber Brandt. So we'll be focusing on the Article 5 Convention, what's the need for knowing your civil rights, and how we need to make it a law. So basically, the history of America. You know, you cannot expect change if you live in a country built on oaths. And a lot of people think that when America started in 1776, that it was based on Christian values, on biblical values, when actually it wasn't. It was based on Freemasonry and oaths. And so we're going to go a little bit deeper into Freemasonry another time, but what we're focusing on is how to address police brutality, how to bridge the gap between law enforcement, and how we can improve laws. The first thing to do is to know about the Constitution. The Constitution is our supreme law of the land. It tells us everything we need to know about who we are as an American citizen. Unfortunately, there are only certain ways that you can change the Constitution. And when the Constitution started in 1787, our forefathers, our framers, were actually Freemasons. So they did not include African Americans at that time into the Constitution. So when we speak about an Article 5 convention, how can we change laws? An Article 5 convention is literally that in Article 5. Verbatim, the Congress, whenever 2/3 of both houses shall deem it necessary, shall propose amendments to this Constitution, or on the application of the legislations of 2/3 of several states, shall call a convention for proposing amendments, in which either case shall be valid to all intents, purposes as part of this Constitution when ratified by at least 3/4 of several states, or conventions of 3/4 thereof. And so basically, the Constitution allows us to change the laws by convening in a group. Now, there's only two other ways that the laws can change. And the first way is to have Congress or have our local lawmakers place a bill, and it could either sit on the desk and collect dust, or we can actually have a group of local neighborhood people that can elect among themselves what they need in the neighborhood, have constant meetings, which would be a convention, and discuss what their needs are. This is probably the best and effective way of us changing laws in America. But if we're not constantly meeting, and if you don't know your neighbors and you're not really active in your community, it's kind of hard to change the legislative values there. So we depend on the young people to do that in empowerment. So by law, when the Constitution started, persons of African descent born on American soil were not deemed even human to be part of this change. And so 3/5 of a person by law was created in 1787. This was to form the North and the South as a union to form one nation. And so because African Americans were excluded and Indians not taxed, the only persons that were we the people were the framers, those of landowners and of Caucasian descendants. Currently, African Americans are considered property since the inception. So even though the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment ratified blacks as equal, it never really erased the fact that they were still property. So by law, by definition, currently to this day, the Constitution states that blacks are still property. Now, this is what Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, JFK was trying to say, that we need to have human rights as a law. Until these human rights are considered for all human beings to be 100% human and not some property and not some who are taxed, but all become human, then that's when we can say the Constitution is right for all. But currently, as it stands, the way that it's written, it literally states that African Americans are still property. So until that happens, we can't really foresay that we are all created equal. To add insult to injury, when overseen by elected non-blacks to keep slaves in check at the time, these groups of selected people were called the slave patrols. The slave patrols were also called patrollees or patty rollers by slave persons of African descent. These were organized by a group of locals, which is an unconventional convention, but this was a convention of how to keep the slaves in check. They enforced discipline, and they were established in South Carolina in 1704. This idea of patrolling the slaves was a great idea at the time, which spread out through the other colonies soon thereafter. They were legal and they were lethal. Slave patrollers had their own characteristics and duties and benefits apart from the slave owners and the overseers at the time. Patrollers were equipped with guns and whips and would exert force in order to bring slaves back to their owners. So this was the original form for slave patrols. And they also had a swore oath. Again, we go back to that oath before they actually did their duties. And it stated, I do swear that I, as a searcher for guns, swords, and other weapons among slaves in my districts, faithfully and privately as I can, discharge the trust reposed in me, as the Lord directs, and to best of my power, so help me God. It's funny how they use the word of God when they're enforcing, brutality on another human being. But this is also the confusion of Christianity, which is another subject. But this oath was a oath that was in North Carolina, slave patrollers would say before they take their jobs in 1828. Their duties primarily were to chase down and apprehend and provide an organized way of making sure that the slave revolts did not go out of control. Typically, slave patrol enforced curfews as well, and it checked travelers for ID and preventing any form of organized resistance. Does that sound familiar? This is exactly what law enforcement is in place for today, to enforce the law. So the process of how one becomes a patroller is vetted. And so as slavery became abolished in the 1840s to the late 1850s, there was really no need for the slave patrols. So naturally, these group of slave patrollers morphed into law enforcement. And so that's where we have the actually first police department was in the United States, was in New York in 1844. This organized through New Orleans in 1852 and Boston and Philadelphia in 1854. Soon after, in 1915, a group of officers sworn in to protect law enforcers. And this group was called the Fraternal Order of Police. And if you're into etymology, fraternal means brother. It's also another brotherhood. So when you ask people, what is the Fraternal Order of Police? A lot of people have different answers. But Fraternal Order of Police is actually a secret society, so to speak. That's not really so secret. They are sort of the union for LAPD and some sort of sheriff. The other portion of police union is called the Los Angeles Professional Peace Officers Association, also known as PPOA. And this is exclusively in LA County, where if law enforcers are not fraternal order, then they'll be joining the LA PPOA, Professional Peace Officers Association. And they are created to help collaborative rights for law enforcement. That's solely their right, is to make sure that law enforcement get due process, that they are not tried, that their Bill of Rights are not hindered, even when they are part of a crime. And that's where we're going to go into why Breonna Taylor and why justice for officers in police shootings are not readily brought to trial or brought to justice right away. Now, the Fraternal Order of Police first lodge is in Pittsburgh, and it derived in, as I mentioned before, in 1854. The Fraternal Order was founded later on, 1915, by two Pittsburgh police patrol officers, Martin Toole and Delbert Nagel. They and 21 other members of Pittsburgh met and established the first local of a fraternal order in Fort Pitch. And in 1918, it was decided that the order should become a national organization. The order's constitution stated that race, creed, or color shall be no bear. So that means anybody who's a law enforcer that wants to join is able to join. The symbol of the Fraternal Order Police badge, you may not be able to see it clearly here, but it says Jus, Fides, and Libertatem, which means justice, friendship, and liberty. But if you look on the Fraternal Order of Police website, it states that Jus, Fides, and Libertatem means that law enforcement is hardened and law is a safeguard for freedom. And I can tell you right now that's absolutely false. So justice, friendship, and liberty is actually what it should have stood for, but it morphed into something different in the 2020s. The order of membership is over 330,000 members, organized in over 2,200 in local chapters, state lodges, as you see, and grand lodges. Instead of the FOP improving working conditions of law enforcement, they need to bridge the gap of community. And this is where the Article 5 Convention lies in. Until the local community knows that the Fraternal Order Police exist, and who are they? Let's take a look into Breonna Taylor's case. This length that we still don't have justice for her, and the three officers, Mattingly, Hankinson, and Cosgrove, were not brought to justice right away. A matter of fact, it's outrageous how 5 months later we still are waiting for a verdict. So who's responsible for calling out these officers? As you can see here, these are the three officers that were involved in Breonna's shooting. Actually, the people who are responsible is the Kentucky Fraternal Order of Police. And that's ran by Burl Perdue, 62 years old, and Vice President Mike Sweeney. These two are the ones that we should be asking what's going on with Breonna Taylor's killers. So to write to the Kentucky Fraternal Order of Police, their address is 6204 Price Lane Road, Louisville, Kentucky, 40229. They are responsible for the Louisville Police Department, responsible for these officers. Or you can email them at kystatefop@gmail.com. Bill Perdue Jr. and Mike Sweeney. It is not the Attorney General Daniel Cameron who's mostly responsible. So this is why we have to learn the hierarchy on how to have accountability for issues that arise. And that goes along with knowing who is running the law. So Daniel Cameron is under pressure into bringing these three officers to trial, but with the help of local people and social media, for us to continue to state that we have to bring them to justice, we have to bring these three officers to accountability, you must write to the Kentucky Fraternal Order of Police, as I stated before. Moving forward, in Kenosha is another example of police brutality, and the Kenosha Police Department is ran by the Fraternal Order of Wisconsin. And Don Kapla, who you may be able to say here, Don Kapla is the president of the Wisconsin Fraternal Order Police. He's the one that's responsible for the officers who took Jacob Blake's life. And until we bridge that connection and have a conversation, a dialogue with the heads of the fraternal orders nationally, we will always constantly be going through the middleman, and justice will not be served. So the first thing that we have to do in order to bring empowerment to the Black community is, first off, change the Constitution. Have the Article 5 convention, start the groups now. Look into your local neighborhood and gather a few people, have a meeting time that week, use your local resource center, or have Zoom, which is a wonderful platform that connects a lot of important meetings. Start that now. That is your own area. And if you can start mobilizing a group of people with like minds to say, we need to improve laws, we need to improve the justice system, find out who is knowledgeable, who's the lawyer in your neighborhood, who's the neighborhood resource center, who's the person that advocates for homeless, who advocates for domestic violence, who's a counselor, who's a nurse. So all of these people in your neighborhood, in your own circle, are good enough to start a very valid Article 5 convention. And to teach our young people how to come together on that is what's needed as well. They are very equipped and knowledgeable, but they don't know how to put together business meetings. So let's start off small. As you are putting together your local chapters, then that's where the national chapter of how the Constitution shall be amended is needed. The first thing that's needed is human rights as a law. Human rights, 30 articles that was created in 1946 by the United Nations. It was pushed by Eleanor Roosevelt and Franklin D. Roosevelt, who were big supporters of human rights. Unfortunately, these human rights never became a law. And that's what Martin Luther King and Malcolm X were trying to do. Currently, through the method of us starting an Article 5 convention, we can actually start that dialogue of having human rights a law. Remember, we the people have the power. And if we are able to conversate and say, this is what I think needs to be in the Constitution, then we legally, as a group, as a nation, can actually do that right now. According to the Constitution, we have that right. If we do not exercise that right, then we have to leave it to politicians who may not, as we've seen in the last 50 years, have not done right in certain neighborhoods, how urban neighborhoods has been left without for so long. If we can change it right away, we literally have the power to do so. So thirdly, the main thing of bridging the gap for law enforcement is not only to bring out the Fraternal Order of Police, but also the police, professional Peace Officers Association. And this is, as I mentioned before, is exclusively to LA County. So Sheriff Villanueva will be responsible for bringing that out. The president for PPOA is Thomas Lear. These 10 people also that I'll be naming are the top 10 people that are responsible for fraternal order nationwide. Patrick Yose, who is the president of the nationwide National Fraternal Order of Police. Joe Gamaldi, Jimmy Holderfield, John Penzona, Les Neary, Keith Turney, Rob Pride, Brill Perdue, as I mentioned, Kentucky Fraternal Order Police, and Mike Sweeney, the vice president, and Roger Mayberry, who is the California Fraternal Order of Police president. These are a few of many names, up to at least 300 names, that we can ask to have a national dialogue and have our young people find out what the laws that they can change and actually administer. We don't have to wait 6 months to a year or even many years of having a bill turn into a law. We can actually do it right now, right away, with the power of us coming together and saying, I want this changed. And as an American citizen, we should first have the Constitution equal with legislative stating that blacks are indeed 100% human. Right now, as 3/5 of a person, that does not bear any equality. So black lives does not matter until legislative-wise we are equal. So I'd like to turn to my co-host, Amber Brandt, to discuss a little bit about the contract with Black America. This is a contract that O'Shea Jackson, also known as Ice Cube, came up with in order for us to have a more legislative power. And I commend him so much because he's the only entertainer that I've seen so far that has gone this route to actually put in writing a contract that needs to be upheld. And this contract is something that as an Article 5 convention, we can discuss to support and add to it and amend it and make it into a law. So Amber, can you tell us a little bit about the importance of the Black Contract with America and human rights?
Yes, I can. Thank you. I would first like to open and state that our country was founded on the notion of having to fix something that was broken just because of someone having a different skin color than the founders of our country. Mm-hmm. And we know that's just not true. And because of that, our brothers and sisters have had so many indifferences and been targeted by white supremacy, supremacist ideology that tells them that they are savages or uneducated and that somehow our brothers and sisters should be treated differently. It doesn't mean that at all. And that's why I'm excited to introduce Ice Cube's The Contract with Black America 2020. I would like to take an excerpt from the Contract with Black America, which emphasizes, which I believe is the foundation for change. And he states to formally apologize to Black Americans for past discrimination and slavery. He also goes into stating that affirmative action in schools, in public schools and private, should be had per student funding in states on an equal basis instead paid by local property taxes, and Black representation on all government civil rights bodies, including civil rights classes mandatory in elementary schools. Yes. And I would like to add that it's imperative to be acknowledged first and foremost as the foundation to change anything regarding Black America for our brothers and sisters who have been targeted for their color of their skin and the beliefs in our country.
That's right. Thank you so much for that. And if you want to know more about the contract with Black America, you can go onto our website, onepercentage.org, or you could actually Google it as well and go onto the actual website that Ice Cube put up. We definitely need more voices. We need to have more young people involved. And if we keep saying that we want to empower them, and yet the adults and the parents, we are not showing ourselves approved with knowing the Constitution, then we're doing our young people a great disservice. So the Article 5 Convention is the ultimate solution that we need, and that starts right now because it takes time for everyone to put ideas together, to change, to put amendments together. That takes time. And if we can have a daily meeting every day nationwide in your own area and then come together, you know, it could be December 10th, Human Rights Day, it could be January, pick a national day together. But let's start the dialogue. Just as BLM, just as like many other organizations took traction for a movement, we can also take traction for Article 5 Convention movement. That includes all Americans. It's about making America the way for all Americans. And right now, as African Americans, we can't equally say by law that we are even human. So let's start changing that dialogue. The main thing right now is for us to focus digitally. The church body is not like what you think. The buildings are crumbling. The young people have been out there, and the Lord has been with the young people since day one. That's the people's voices that God is hearing. God did not raise a prophet. He did not raise any of these so-called believers. They're not ordained by God. The people who are ordained by God are our young people. Let me decline that. Or our young people. They're the ones that the Lord is listening to right now. And so our job is to empower them with the tools. And we want to create digital studios, mobile digital schools, virtual reality, artificial intelligence, teach these kids coding. Not only kids, adults. We need to be equal. First of all, you got to have an email address. If you are living right now without an email address, it doesn't matter how old you are, you must be relevant for 2020. And that starts with basic digital resources. From that, the Zoom meetings is also a second way. But what we want to do in the next 2 months before election is to really have a group of young people that we know that could be elected in jobs, for them to be trained right now in Article 5 and teaching them and saying, I want to hear from you. How can we make the Constitution better? What do we need to do to change laws? And to have them have the platform, have a microphone, some chairs, some food, and the kids will come. But allow them to speak and start exchanging ideas, because they're dying for that. They're dying for that platform. And we can't keep coming up with these programs that we say that we're for the young people, but not allowing the young people to speak for themselves. It's totally different way of communicating that we have to do. So I urge everyone, if you want to start an Article 5 convention in your town, please call us at 323-884-8583, or you can email us at info@onepercentage, that's ONEPERCENTAGE.org, and just say, hey, I want to start a convention in my town. Where do I go? How do I start it? And we'll help you with the basic tools that you already have in order to make that change. And by this time next year, we'll be able to have a different voice. We'll be able to really see the young people not being depressed, to have empowerment and to start changing laws. It really is what it's all about, legislative changes. So I've covered basically all. I hope I've covered just the basics on how we can fight legislative-wise and to change the laws, but more importantly, how to empower ourselves in order to make things change for our young people. That's what it's really all about. So I thank you again for this moment. And, DCFS. So we just also briefly, children rights is one of the main things that's at jeopardy nationwide. And as we are forming these Article 5 conventions, we want to put in mind that a lot of the young people that are being abused aren't able to speak or even have their rights faltered. So we want to keep in mind the sensitivity of saving our children at this crucial time. There are a lot of ousting, of child abuse and child trafficking that is being exposed, and we want to show our support 100%. And our young people, such as Damian Teller and Bodie Schofield, January Schofield, or Heaven Morris, a lot of our young people who are fighters, who want to see changes in this system, are waiting for us to change. So please be encouraged, join the movement, and we would love to see everyone being part of this movement, not only for changing legislation, but for saving and empowering our children. Okay. Did you switch me back? Still on? Okay. All right.
Thank you, Dr. Mello. It's Marie.
Thank you. Oh, hi, Marie. Okay. Now I
No,
see you. Okay.
thank, yeah, good to see you.
Same
Thank you.
here.
That was very informative, and you were so correct. When the Constitution was written, it wasn't written with anybody else in mind except really white men,
Absolutely. Yes.
to be totally honest,
And as I mentioned before, Freemasonry is something that we have to put in the forefront as well, which is what I didn't mention too much. But we cannot confuse Christianity. I mean, we cannot confuse God with Freemasonry. We cannot
Right.
serve two masters. And the point is, a lot of the Christian pastors and people who are in high powers, judges, lawyers, they are self-proclaimed Masons. And
Yes,
we cannot have two of the same entity. You cannot serve money and then expect to know what God really wants. And
Right.
the Lord says that if you love the world, then you cannot love God. And so I want to make a public decree that please, if you are a Freemason, I want you to have public forums about it. Inform people what Freemasonry is really about. Because the God that you serve in Freemasonry is something called the Grand Architect. And when you really look at the Grand Architect, it's really Lucifer. That's basically who you're serving. And a lot of people who want to join this brotherhood or sisterhood, so to speak, Eastern Stars, I know a lot of
Right.
friends and family who are part of that. And they think that it's a brotherhood type thing or sisterhood type thing, when actually it's not. The history of the Freemasons go back to the Scottish Rite. The Prince Hall came afterwards. So when we're thinking about the history of what it is to be a Freemason, it actually is the most sophisticated way of saying that I worship Lucifer. And we may not like to hear that, but we're not here about saying stuff you want to hear. We're here about divulging the truth and why America is being suffocated, because we cannot have an oath. As the Lord say in Matthew 5:34, he made it specific that you cannot swear from the top of your hair because you cannot make it gray. You cannot swear from the land or the air because you did not create it.
Created.
And that's what the Lord was talking about specifically by making an oath, by swearing to something other than to God. And when we give division, we subconsciously say, God, I want to serve you, but I want to serve money as well. And so that's where the confusion lies. So I want to just make it clear especially for our young people to know that these churches that operated under God, majority of them were Freemasonic churches, that is not God at all. The God, the spirit that you have, the Jesus spirit that we have, is a spirit of truth. And that will always be in the forefront and mask any confusion. Religion and all of that, that's man-made. That's not of
Yes.
God. So when people are saying I'm a Christian, I'm a religious organization. That's actually an oxymoron. That's actually a double talk. You cannot be. Religion means technically how man can get to heaven on his own. That's the actual definition of religion. So we as believers of the way are not religious folks. We are believers of the way. And then religion came after, created by the same grand architect, Lucifer, that created Freemasonry. They're all groups and oaths. And when you take all of that away, you are just left there with you, yourself, and the bare truth. And that's all the young people need in order to find freedom. So I can talk all day about that, but I just wanted to give a tidbit on how we can just go straight to the source, go to the head without being confused through the middleman. And that's the elephant in the room is Freemasonry.
Yeah. Dr. Fellingham?
Are there any other questions for our sweet speaker? I love what you have been sharing. You gave us so many insights into history and details, and I think everyone learned really a lot. Let me ask you if you have any questions. All you have to do is just unmute. You all have the ability to unmute yourselves. Boy, did you do a perfect job because nobody has any questions?
All right. Well, definitely, I would love to hear from the other speakers and other leaders nationwide. I would love to know what your business plan is. You must start with a plan. We want to have all the plans at the table so we can have a national Article 5 convention for real, like starting yesterday. So please email us, info@onepercentage.org. I thank you, Dr. Capitino and Dr. Paula Fellingham. You are definitely one of our best mentors, and I thank you again for having this platform that's so needed. Please, we need it again. We need it often. And we, the people, are ready. We're organizing as we speak, and we just need a chance for our local leadership to work with the constituents that they serve and to respect the proposals, because there's a lot of hidden, discrimination that we're not going to go into, but we can't be hypocritical about being forthright for humans, and yet we're causing the trauma behind the scenes, because at the end, the people that are really suffering is our young people. They need a sense of direction, and they're ready. The foundation schools, hopefully in 2021, we want to launch with real estate gurus. We want Silicon Valley people. We want young black and brown youth, well, any race, really. We want any young person who's interested in making that change. Please contact us. Let us know what skills that you possess. Let us know what you need, and we will make it happen. Because it's really time right now that we come together and to really make a digital change, the digital leap, as we so to speak. So Article 5 convention, please let us know when you want to start it in your city or town, and that's the first step in joining this movement.
Thank you so much, so very much, Dr. Mello Desire. Again, I love your name.
Tushat, and my partner here, Amber Brandt, and we're a group of 8 of us. So 2 of us are representing today, but we are in Los Angeles really putting forth for civil rights. So if anyone need any questions or need to know how to file a lawsuit, especially concerning civil rights, please contact us as well. This is the main important thing that we're putting at the table.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. So I am honored to be our next.
Zoom. Okay, so let's next week we want to put it together DCFS protest. September 24th in Chateau Place. And right now, the Kingdom Warriors Foundation and the LA Affidavit Group, AB Health Commission, coming together to put together one of the largest protest against the Department and Children and Family Services. How wonderful and needed is that?
It had to happen like yesterday, as you
Yes.
said.
Mm-hmm.
So many of our children that we are in touch with our foundation and others that are reaching out, they're literally crying for help because they're being kidnapped by the #1 criminal organization, CPS, known in Los Angeles as DCFS,
Yes.
Department of Children and Family Services.
Yeah.
And one of our phenomenal speakers who is just reeling to get out, her name is Janie Schofield.
Yes.
And she will be a speaker at Chateau Protest. And
September 24th.
yes, September
And
24th.
next week, we will have her as our guest. She'll be our first young person speaking about the atrocities of the system. You may have heard her before. She actually was on Dr. Phil show last year. And lo and behold, it was at the Dr. Phil show where DCFS took her. And her and her brother Bodie, which is currently he's being abused right now in Compton. There is a safe house. And Asia Brown, I'm just, this is a direct message for you. You have to be more hands-on when it comes to social services, because we don't want any children that are in foster care unnecessarily being abused. And so this is what's happening. So Bodie Schofield, we definitely are putting this out here, and we are definitely going to be fighting for your rights. And your sister, January Schofield, will talk more about that. But in general, the Department of Children and Family Services have for so long violated their own welfare institution codes. And in the welfare institution codes, it states that a child and a parent, anytime they have to go through the system, they have to have all of these checkpoints and reasons. And so sometimes a lot of these cases that are drafted are based on false information, on detention reports that are inaccurate. You have random people that are not even part of your family that are suddenly in your detention report stating that you've met them or abusing your child. And it's just a hot mess. And so currently right now at Edelman Courthouse, they have been closed and they're doing repairs, upgrades, who knows. But the repair needs to be in the staffing, needs to be in the system itself, needs to be in the social workers who know that they are violating parents' civil rights. Anytime that you have a visit with a social worker, first of all, you have the right to state that if there is no abuse in your house, and you know there's no abuse in your house, then you have a right to state that they can't come without a search warrant. A lot of these kids are incentivized through the 1997 Adoption and Safe Families Act. This was an act that was signed by Bill and Hillary Clinton in 1997 that incentivized federal dollars and to each state that held a child. So a child would have to be in the system for 15 months in order for the federal money of $1,500 for that child to kick in. So you'll see a child being held in the system, and they are being separated from their parents unethically with no basis. And if they are not in the system for 15 months at least, then they can't get the federal dollars. And that's what really is the name of the game. And so unfortunately, Child Protective Services have been trafficking a lot of our children. That's why you've seen an explosion of Save the Children protests in Hollywood and Highland, because the time has come. It's just like a pregnant woman. It's time to give birth. It was just so many atrocities for oh so long. It had no choice but to burst at the seams. And so we want the focus right now for the children to have their own platform so they can speak on what they want to see changed. And so we don't have an issue with Department of Children and Family Services. It's just that the methods and the systems that they're using is so illegal and actually causing more damage to the children, then we have a problem with DCFS. So if you are a government entity and yet you are disguising as a organization to protect the child, why is a child coming out more traumatized? Why are kids killing themselves in your foster care? Why are they coming up with bruises that they didn't have when they were in the care of these parents? Why are they being paired with sex offenders known sex offenders. So these are the questions that has to be answered when we say, is DCFS there to protect and serve our kids? No. So these are the things that we want to bring to light, but we need support of families. We need people who are going through the same thing to tell their stories. Accountability is now. So is there anything that you think that we need to bring forth that we haven't mentioned concerning DCFS?
I would just like to make a statement to all the families out there, to mothers and fathers who are going through an open DCFS case. Don't have fear. You know, DCFS is going to do exactly what they're going to do, whether you follow your case plan, you don't.
That's right.
The majority, the current season right now for them is that you do your case plan, you still don't get your kids back.
That's right.
So stand your ground. Speak out about the abuse your children are telling you about. My son, Zaid, and my daughter, Farida Ayubi, are also in the system. And they were speaking out about the abuse consistently.
Yes.
And then when COVID-19 hit, I haven't seen them since March. And then everything ceased. Mm-hmm. And you know, their situation is very common among many where they are literally in a high security prison. It feels like, because they monitor their phone calls. It's not just my children. It's many of our children. They monitor their phone calls, who they speak to. It's a lot of psychological abuse.
Right.
Grooming.
And they're telling you that your mother doesn't care about you. It's a lot of falsities, and they know what they're doing. But ultimately, we can't have a system that's supposed to be in place to protect our children to actually harm them. So that's why we want to focus on, we're not even talking about shutting down the police. We're not talking about defunding the police. We're talking about defunding DCFS.
Yes.
Okay? That's what's most important, is to defund entities like that. So Bobby Cagle from Georgia, okay, and Nancy Schaefer, who was 82. She was 82, for God's sakes.
And they shot her and her
and
husband.
her elderly husband, stating that it was a suicide because she was bringing out the atrocities of Child Protective Services, the harm that was going. So overall, we cannot operate in fear, and when it's time to tell the truth, that we are afraid that something will happen. So we want to be transparent with everything all the way around, and we as American citizens, we just want to live. We want to raise our kids. We want a happy life. We don't want to harm anyone. We're not here to destroy people's lives, but for some reason, we feel that as American citizens, we are constantly being under attack without accountability.
Absolutely.
And so that's where we have to educate ourselves and know the law. You've got to know the law. There's no way around that. Know the Constitution, see what's in it first, and see how we can form this Article 5 convention. And if our allies for Black lives, all people, all races, we need to start changing that clause that says 3/5 of a person. Without that change, it automatically states that, yes, we know that as Blacks that you are not human, but, you know, hey, Black Lives Matter. That is not making sense. It doesn't matter to me if on paper I'm still property, right? And our children shouldn't feel that way. So thank you guys so much for joining us. This is our first spiel of weekly podcast. So we will have various subjects, title. We don't even have a title, but today we just want to do a debut of our freedom fighters fighting for truth, justice. JDAF, life is awesome. It's going to be awesome. For our children's sake.
A lot of change is coming, and people are sentient, unfortunately, because of our media censoring so many truths that's going on in movements.
And this is unconventional, but I'm going to go a little off cue right now because I want to put somebody on live who I think is an understatement of a powerful Black woman. So come follow me, Facebook. And we are going to see Nancy Morris. Hi, everybody. This is the woman that has all the magic touch.
She is.
Can you tell us a little bit about Morris Media?
Morris Media Studios is a podcast
audience, come on down, show your support for local businesses. Morris Media is definitely Black woman empowerment. And so thank you guys so much.
Thank
Being
you.
here. We're signing off. And thanks again for Dr. Marsha Carpatino and Paula Fellingham for our conference. We need more speakers, and we need to do this every year. Right now is Power to the People. So we're signing off. Kingdom Warriors.